To situate myself and my remarks today, I wanted to note that I'm a social scientist who, after a brief stint in a tenure track job in women's and gender studies, has worked in a medical school for over a decade. Although science and technology studies, STS, and sociology remain my primary intellectual homes, I can say that I now work in bioethics. My research is most relevant to the field of bioethics, and the grants I've been awarded have primarily taken advantage of bioethics funding opportunities from the National Institutes of Health. Yet, as a social scientist, bioethics doesn't quite fit. There's a fundamental mismatch in worldview that creates interdisciplinary tensions in how to analyze and understand social phenomena. To me, this is nowhere more apparent than in conceptualizations of justice. So the topic of the panel today is reckoning with research methods and ethics, and I thought I could bring lessons from conducting social science research about ethical issues to bear on a discussion about methods and ethics. To dig into this more, I'll ask you to indulge me while I use my own research to illustrate the points I want to make today. Although I have had many research projects over the years, I usually say that the common theme that runs through these projects has been my interest in documenting and analyzing how social inequalities are produced or exploited by commercialized medicine in the United States. And the majority of my work has focused on medical research, particularly pharmaceutical industry clinical trials, to explore how a for-profit system of medical research works on the ground and to examine who participates in clinical trials, both in terms of the investigators and research staff conducting the studies and the people who enroll in trials as human subjects. To oversimplify my research on clinical trials, my findings can be boiled down to two major points. First, and this is the big point, the US healthcare system has made this country an ideal place to conduct research for the pharmaceutical industry. And this is in spite of the increasing globalization of clinical trials that has happened over the last 2 decades. Yes, the United States has well-trained researchers and doctors and state-of-the-art hospitals and research clinics, but the real reason the US is well situated to do clinical trials for the pharmaceutical industry is that US populations on the whole have inadequate access to affordable healthcare. So if you're someone who has a disease and have limited access to healthcare, or cannot afford prescription drugs for your condition, then you might be more inclined to enroll in a clinical trial because you see it as the best or only way to try to get some kind of medical attention. Of course, you might receive a placebo rather than an investigational medication, so it's problematic to think of research as medical treatment, but this is still worth it each year to thousands of patients who feel they have no better way to access medical care and have been described by the pharmaceutical industry as ready to recruit patients, but may more aptly be described, as I have done, as patients who are ready to consent to research. The second important finding from my research stems from the fact that clinical trials don't just use patients with a disease or condition to test investigational pharmaceuticals. Most of my work for the past decade has focused on so-called phase 1 trials, which test the safety and tolerability of drugs. These clinical trials primarily use healthy participants and often require confinement to a research facility for days or even weeks while a study is being conducted. Again, the United States is a primary site of phase 1 trials worldwide because our society is characterized by massive employment insecurity, profound financial precarity, and an inadequate social safety net to assist those in need. What's more, and this hardly needs to be said to this audience and in the context of today's conference, but this country's history of racism and the extent to which structural racisms permeate all of our institutions mean that people of color are disproportionately subject to barriers to stable employment and secure sources of income. Enter phase 1 trials. These studies pay healthy people to enroll, and the compensation can be substantial, with the average trial offering $3,000 in exchange for participation. And what my research has revealed is that despite widespread narratives about the underrepresentation of people of color in biomedical research, the demographics of research participation are turned on their head in phase 1 trials, where people of color, particularly Black and Latino men, are dramatically overrepresented in these paid research studies. Thus, to summarize these two findings, on one hand, pharmaceutical clinical trials can be seen as an opportunity for individuals who have health problems but no other means of getting treatment, or for individuals who need or want to supplement their incomes. But on the other hand, pharmaceutical clinical trials can be seen as exacerbating and profiting from existing social and economic inequalities. So this leads me back to bioethics, the social sciences, and notions of justice. As many of you are probably very familiar, the ethical framework that was used to inform the research oversight system in the US is the Belmont Report, which was published in 1979 and was the result of work by the National Commission for the Protection of Human Subjects of Biomedical and Behavioral Research. The commission was created as a result of the National Research Act of 1974, which was legislation passed largely in response to revelations about the Public Health Service's infamous syphilis study in Tuskegee, Alabama, as well as attention to the use of prisoners in biomedical research. The Belmont Report argued that 3 ethical principles must guide human subjects research. Those principles are respect for persons, which is also referred to as autonomy, beneficence, and justice. While I could say a lot about autonomy and beneficence, I'll focus in the little time I have remaining on justice. According to the Belmont Report, the principle of justice dictates that the benefits and burdens of research should be fairly distributed, meaning that one group should not disproportionately benefit from research, nor should another group bear the burdens or risks of research. In the field of bioethics, due in large part to its philosophical roots, the concept of justice has been treated in a fairly abstract manner to questions of how justice can be enacted, such as questions as to whether distribution should be divvied up equally or based on need, individual effort, merit, and so on. When applied in practice, particularly in terms of research oversight, justice has largely meant that all members of society should have a fair opportunity to participate in research, and that some groups should not be targeted for enrollment. This may all sound good, but even since the enactment of human subjects protections and the use of institutional review boards, IRBs, to oversee research, the concept of justice is the one that's been the trickiest to effectively operationalize. Moreover, in practice, it hasn't worked. To return to my research, taking the case of patients who enroll in clinical trials as a problematic form of healthcare, uninsured or underinsured research participants as a group can be said to have an unfair burden in the development of new pharmaceuticals for which they are unlikely to receive the long-term benefits given their limited access to expensive prescription drugs. This is certainly counter to normative expectations about justice. Likewise, the healthy participants who enroll in phase 1 trials for income indicate that this research exploits the poor who take on the burden and risks of drug development without even the possibility of direct medical benefit, because remember, they're healthy, and are unlikely to enjoy any long-term benefits of new pharmaceuticals getting to the market. Plus, when we put into context that the pharmaceutical industry makes billions of dollars off successful drugs, then the injustice of the system is even clearer. What my research illustrates is the need not only for empirical investigations of clinical trials or other medical research, but also the fact that social science research on topics like this must engage and explore how issues of justice or injustice, more aptly, manifest in biomedical research. It also shows that our research oversight system is ill-equipped to consider these social justice issues when reviewing research protocols and approving human subjects research. I've been singling my own research and scholarship out here because I've been thinking about these topics for a long time, but much social science research has focused on social inequalities in myriad manifestations, and not just in medical research, of course. The question I want to pose now is, how can we apply these lessons to our own fields, as well as biomedical research, to ensure that research is conducted ethically? Social scientists, me included, often complain about IRBs and the mismatch between the oversight system for medical research and the types of empirical projects we social scientists conduct. And there's definitely reason to complain, but I think it's worth considering how the oversight system can incorporate insights from the social sciences about fairness, exploitation, and justice to catalyze a reckoning about ethics and methods that minimizes attention to abstract notions of justice while augmenting attention to social justice, particularly as it relates to acknowledging and dismantling many of the racist social structures upon which research is built. I think the social sciences are positioned to do this. And I think that universities and academic medical centers must ensure that research is conducted to redress social inequalities, not use those social inequalities to recruit participants to research. Thank you.